It's a special video that we're going to do today, but before we begin this video, I want to issue a quick apology for the delay in releasing some of my promised RC footage videos. I have quite a few, but I have been extremely busy ever since I got back from holiday, and there just hasn't been time to edit those videos and to put them up. However, they will come at some stage. But today we're going to be doing something different. As you can see, I've got an Injora chassis over here. I'd just like to turn it around so you can actually see it the right way. It's a carbon fiber chassis. I've got some shocks for it. Those are Desert Lizards, which I have conveniently pre-tuned and set up already because they take long to do. But in this video, I'm going to do a build. We've got an Injora chassis. We've got a Fusion Pro Elite. I've never tried that on a rock crawler. It will be interesting to try. We've got Meus or Meus axles, straight axles. I've noticed on rock crawlers, especially LCG rock crawlers, portal axles are not the best thing for that. Portal axles work very well on trail, but many of my rock crawler rigs that I've had on the rocks with portal axles usually flip over and they don't do so well. So we've got some straight axles. I believe the front is weighted and the rear is not. So it provides that good climbing and weight balance. This chassis is an LCG chassis, and you'll see it even as we set up. We've got the links, and I believe these are high clearance links, so they'll be quite good with this build. And we've also got some Meus or Meus prop shafts or drive lines, whatever you want to call them. The way this video is going to work is different from my other builds. I'm going to start by unboxing this, and let's see what comes in the box. Then I'm going to pause the video and come back when it's fully set up and show you how that looks. Then we'll move on to the next part. Perhaps we'll fit the motor, or perhaps we'll fit something else. Perhaps we'll set up the axles. We'll play it as we go. And lastly, we'll fit these rims that I got. I'm trying them out. I've never used them before. I don't know if they're good or bad. However, my good friend Sean from RC633 says they're good. So I take his word on it. He knows what he's talking about and he knows what he's doing. So I took his suggestion. We're going to try those out and we'll put some tires on them and we'll have a complete chassis. That'll be part one, having this chassis on wheels with the motor connected. And we'll have to wait a while, unfortunately, because the body, the LCG body that I want to put on this rig is not in stock anywhere in this country, so I have to wait until someone brings it in. So part two will be quite delayed, and it's important that you know that well in advance. But without any further delay, let's get into this build. Let us start with the unboxing. Okay, so I've taken off that plastic cover and let's see what's in this Injora box. 110 chassis kit. I believe this is the INF 10-F. I believe that sounds for fiber or something, or stands for fiber, I don't know. Let's see. So you get an instruction pack, which is very nice. Tells you what goes where. We'll look at that in detail soon. This is one of the rock sliders on the side, and I believe this also holds the battery. You can see, or maybe it does. We'll investigate that further as we set this up. It's got some mounting points. These will most certainly come in handy. And then it's got all the rest of the hardware that we need in order to get this working. What else comes in this box? No, that's part of the chassis. First of all, I really like this because I was thinking I have to open this box and I have to set up everything. Now, please take note, I'm not a salesperson for this company. This channel is all about builds and adventure, and we do different things. Fix cars, do whatever, fix whatever interests me and whatever you would find interesting. That's why you've clicked on this video. So I'm quite interested to actually see that, or quite happy to see that this actually comes pre-set up. So there's not much work we have to do on this. So let me get this out of here and take off this plastic, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I got this chassis out of its box, but look how nice this box is. I'm one of those people, when I see a box like this, I'm gonna keep it because I've got a lot of small parts, small gadgets, like leftovers from here, things like this, that'll be left over and they get lost in different places or in different tool cases. What I usually do is actually just put a label on the box that I've kept and state what I've stored in it. This is such a nice box to store some small parts, things that I'm not using for now. For instance, I had these desert lizards that were stored away. They're old, obviously, but I've renewed them. I've worked on them. I had them stored in a certain box so I could find them. But enough about the box, let's get to the chassis. So just a quick examination. It comes set up nicely, set up well. You can see this is a proper LCG chassis, and I'll get to the whole chassis and its setup in time. But one thing I noticed over here, coming out of the transfer case, going from the gearbox over here, going to the transfer case, you get a 1-to-1 ratio going to the back, or you get underdrive. Obviously, because of what we're building this car for, we're going to use the underdrive. Now let's look at the chassis, and when you spin this, it's so smooth. It is so smooth. The front is obviously just one point that comes out, and it's got the Injora branding on the gearbox itself. It's got the Injora branding on the chassis. As you can see, the shape of the chassis is quite well designed. It allows you to put your shocks going all the way back over there. One thing we are going to do before we install anything else is make sure all the screws are actually tightened down nicely. Sometimes companies just put the screws in place to hold the chassis together. But one thing we do notice over here is the skid plate at the bottom over here. Yeah, there we go. INC-10. The skid plate at the bottom over here is at an angle, which is really good. It's angled. So I think that's going to help with our rock crawling endeavors, and it's going to help us to build a really cool rig. And the motor mounts at the bottom. I believe it mounts at the back over here. And I love the fact that the driveline comes out on this side. It's really nice because in a previous build that I was doing, everything is in the way of everything. That was the Red Cat, which I'll show you. I had to do substantial modifications to it. I had to put the motor up instead of down, keeping it in a place where it's not a true LCG, in order to fit a 4-link system. Now we're going to go 4-link on this also. Hopefully it's got the option for a pan-out bar, but I want to go 4-link because that will allow us to have a bit more flex. It also helps with the capability of the RC. We're going to keep it servo on axle, not servo on the chassis, so that it's not affected by bump steer and things like that. But you can see the chassis, and at the end it's got this nice metal finish over here. You see this mat that I'm working on, the fact that it's dirty. I actually worked on a build, and I'm going to post a video about that, the final result. It was an experiment, so I didn't want to spend time and video recording that. So let me do the checks, and let me move on to the next things, and then we'll be back. Over here you can see in this pack there's body mounts, there's clips, and there's extra bars that would go across like this. There's one extra that I can see. and there's another in another pack that I can see over here. So we'll go through the manual, see where those go, whether we'll need them in our specific build. Obviously we'll need body mounts for the body to sit on, but right now we don't know what body we're going to put on because there's no stock, as I said earlier. So let's move on to this build, let's get something done, and then I'll be back to share some more. Okay, so the front and the rear protectors have been put on, and that basically protects the edge of this carbon fiber piece from scratching and rubbing on the ground or being hit, which I think is quite good. And I like the angles because it won't necessarily affect this is the front that I'm showing you, it won't affect the approach and the departure angles. At the back we've set it in such a way, and we've got some long links, so it gives you some space. One thing I noted and I really like about this chassis is you can actually change all the configuration. As you can see over here, you can actually swap the whole thing around in a different way. If you want to put long tires in the front and put the motor up front, you can swap everything around. But we're going to use it in the way that it's come set up. And I've put Loctite on every screw that I'm not going to open. So these ones over here, they're done and they're set for good. Same with the back. And I've also set these ones with Loctite for good because the upper links are going to connect on these screw points over here, these holes which you can see over there. And we don't want the transfer case to move that way because it's going to cause this drive shaft to hit against the upper link. So where it is right now is perfect. That's why I've locked it in place. Gives you an option. Another thing I really like about this, as opposed to other LCG chassis I've worked on, is it's one of them that gives you the ability to move the whole motor and spur gear mount up in case it's not clearing this upper link with the motor. And also, if you look at it over here, the motors in the center are slightly offset from the side. In the Red Cat, I had a bit of an issue because the motor was placed right to the end, and that meant in order to make it 4-link, or in order to get high clearance links to fit in there, I had to flip it over where the motor was on the top. So the motor was now sitting up here in order to get it to be a 4-link with high clearance links. So I actually really like this design. I think it's much better than some of the other designs that you get out there ready to run. So this is quite cool. I think it'll work for us and what we want to do. On the note of Loctite, some guys go crazy when they're putting on Loctite, but all that's needed is a little dab. Otherwise you're going to fuse those screws in, and then you'll have to heat up the chassis in the points where you've put it in order to take it off. But it definitely needs Loctite in the areas that are subject to vibration or move a lot. Okay, so there might be a bit of change in lighting. I had to take a bit of a break and do some work, but I'm back. We are unboxing the next phase of this project, which is the Fusion Pro Elite, and I don't need to tell you the specs. I think all you need to know is 2 to 4S, and it's also got an extra programmable cable which you can connect to the receiver, which you can change settings on the fly. On my other setup, I've got it set up where I can change the amount of drag brake on the go. It's also 2300 kV. The main difference between this and the Fusion Pro is this one's got a shorter can. This one has 2 to 4S capability and also that extra programmable wire. It's also got different driving modes, some hybrid modes, and you may be able to program it with different cards from that one. However, on that last point, I stand under correction. It's been quite long since I last installed this motor and compared the two. But I'm installing this in this LCG build because I've noticed with the LCG builds you need a shorter motor it's preferable to use a shorter motor, because sometimes the motors, if they're too long, if the can is too long, it hits on the links and it prevents you from building a full-on LCG build. So let's open this, and if I had a Fusion Pro right here, I would have compared, but this video is not about that. This video is about setting up this RC car. So as you can see, that's how short it is. The standard Fusion Pro would come up to somewhere here. It's much shorter, which is very nice. It gives us a lot of space to fit it in there on the chassis. As you can see, it doesn't sit at the front. And one thing I did on the chassis is I took off this front plate over here, because we're not going to be having a servo and a pan-out bar. I also took off the pan-out bar link, and we're going to have a servo and axle. So this is going to work well with this setup, and the space over here on the chassis is going to allow for the servo to go up and down and articulate and pass through this area without hitting anything. As usual in the box, I'm trying to do this with one hand, because we are recording with one hand and doing this with the other. In the box you get 2 cable ties, 1 cable tie, and 2 leads over here. One is an extension and one is for the programming card, or you can use both as extensions depending on your setup. I don't think we'll need to use those. And you get 2 cable ties, and you get the manual. I believe you should also, the manual is stuck in there. I believe you should also get some stickers, and also the sticker for the button, which we'll use at some stage. So there's the motor and the wires. Here's the extra programming cable that I talked about, and that's the setup. Okay, and as you can see, the Fusion Pro Elite has been installed, and you see the reason why I actually chose this. It's short, I think, and I thought it would work really well in this chassis. The one thing I really like about this is, especially with the motor being short, there's this option to move the whole motor mount up or down, which is quite nice. I think there's a limit that you can move before this shaft starts hitting on the motor, but currently, as you can see, we've got a lot of space. There's a lot of space between that shaft and the motor. And one thing I want to point out again is I'm so pleased how this motor is more in the center than on the outside, because you can imagine as those 2 links go out, as they go out, I think they go to the inner parts at the top of the axle. There's a chance that they'll come close to the motor if the motor is on either side. There's a bit less clearance on this side, but look, it's much better than the other build I worked on, which was the Red Cat. The Red Cat came with the motor specifically on this side over here where I'm pointing, and that made it difficult. Okay, so now I'm doing the links. These ones over here are the uppers. These are the front over here, and these are the rear down here. So the short ones, which I've already done one, these 2 are the upper front, lower front. But we'll see how it goes when we put them on. I'm just quickly going to put all these on the links, and then we'll get to fitting them to the chassis and or the axles, depending on which one fits better or quicker, which makes it easier, and we'll take it from there. But it's very important with these Meus axles to measure and make sure properly that everything is the same length, so that the axle is straight, and also so that the axle is not at an angle, but it's the front of the pumpkin is like very straight and the servo mount is straight, so that you can turn properly. And I've had a situation before in one of my builds where the axle was at an angle, and then because of that, even though the motor or the servo was throwing the steering to full throw, it wasn't turning as it should. So hopefully we get this right. Let's get into that. I'll get these all done, then I'll be right back. Okay, so all the links are done, And what I'm going to do now is mount the lower links to the chassis first. Then the upper links I'll mount to the axles first. Okay, so my table's getting crowded, but the lower links have been fitted. And as I said, before I fit the upper links, I'm actually going to set up the axles. The rear axle is pretty much ready to go, just needs the upper links, and then we can connect it on, and that'll help us determine which hole over here the link needs to go in so that the axle is straight. And the drive shaft joint doesn't hit the ground or isn't at too much of an angle, because you want to get that right. So we've done the front also. Now we're going to work on the axles quickly. I'll unbox them on this video, and we'll also work on them, and then I'll come back once they're set up. And once I have these rear links and these front links connected on, and then we're going to put it on the chassis and we'll set the shocks on. Okay, so we've got the Meus or Meus racing axles. These are the straight ones and they're short, not 94, sorry. And once again, we're doing this with one hand. So what I'll do is just put everything down in the box that I won't need now. With these stickers, we can put them down. I'll need these screws. I'll need the servo and axle mount. I'll need the front axle. I'll need the rear axle. I'll also need these links. I believe there's more than one. There's 3. And I know this because I set one up just recently. Okay. That's done. That's the box right there. We'll put this to the side for now, and set up the back, then set up the front. So basically all I'm going to do is put the 2 links on over there, and then at the front we're going to put this long link. And what we're going to do before we tighten it down is actually measure how it needs to be so that these can be perfectly straight. Before we put the screw in and tighten it down. Okay, so the front and the back axles are done, and mounted those front links, made sure they're straight so that both wheels are aligned properly. I also put the shocks on for convenience sake while the axles are off the vehicle, and now we're going to put them on the chassis. Okay, so I connected the lower links first, and then we connected the upper links. The reason I did that is there's no point having high clearance links, if I can show you over here, if the joint right here points out downwards or is in the way of the ground, will hit the ground. So in this way, it keeps it from ever getting there. It never gets to a place where the joint is pointing downwards. Should be the same with the back, as you can see where the drive shaft is going to go. So we really pull it high, and the shocks will never go that high. So that's set up and that's running. So we've got this, and we had to play around with the position of the motor. I'm going to set that right and perfect once I've got the shocks fitted on, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so we had to take a bit of a break in our build. I actually wanted to release this the same day I set everything up over here, but we hit 2 setbacks. I spent a lot of hours actually tuning these Desert Lizards for this specific truck, but unfortunately on the lightest springs that I could get over here and the lightest oil that I have in stock, it wasn't possible to get them to work because they just won't extend to the capacity that they should. So I had to make a plan, and I had to wait for them to be delivered. I got the Injora dual rate shocks, and they come with multiple spring options. So once this is set up and it's running in the future, when we get the body and we're doing the tests, we'll also have the springs on standby, and we'll be doing tests on them. But one thing I really do want to do is get these shocks fitted. So we're going to do that right now. I'm going to get these shocks fitted on this chassis. And another hindrance we experienced is when fitting this, I found that the hole that receives the output from the pinion gear on the axle wasn't big enough. So I tried to drill it out, and in the process I ended up damaging that joint over there. So I had to wait for a new one to come in the mail. That's another reason we're delayed. So you can drive it, but what happens is the screw is so, the pin is so loose. That pin right over there that I'm going to zoom into right now, it's so loose, as you can see. As you spin the motor, it just drops out. It just falls out, and it's going to dislodge, and it's not going to be any fun. We need to do this properly. So we're going to hopefully finish this in this session, and I'll have a video for you that I can put up. Okay, so we've gotten all 4 shocks set up, and we put some good oil in there. I can't remember exactly what it is. It wasn't labeled, but I know it's shock oil. And the nice thing I like about these shocks is they actually come with spacers to space them out between the chassis and the axle, so that it sits in the right orientation. And you'll see that even as we've set it up, which I'll do quickly, and then we'll come right back. Okay, and we are done with the install of the shocks, and they're looking very nice. I've set them in such a way so that when they hit the full compression, nothing touches. The motor is at the lowest point it can be. It's not touching anything. When you're using these high clearance links, at the bottom they work perfectly, but on the top you sort of have to push them off to the side slightly, like I've done over there, and then it'll work. But apart from that, we've managed to get this chassis, so you see even that one's off to the side, but because the shocks actually kick in at a certain point, we can actually get away with it. Over here, the reason why we had to flare them out is because then it would touch the driveline. So the issue that you face over here is it would be preferable to have straight links at the top and then high clearance links at the bottom. But then again, we've made it work like this, and I believe I can actually get away with moving the shocks to a different hole where they actually compress a bit more. But we also need to watch this spur gear over here, that it doesn't touch. As you can see, it's coming quite close. So everything's quite close. The place I feel comfortable with the shocks at currently is at hole 1 over there. Unless we get longer shocks, which I do have longer shocks, but then I decided to use those on another rig. I've got a pack right here. These are 100 millimeters, but then I decided to use these on another rig. So we managed to put the servo in, and what I did was mount the servo from the back, because if you mount it on the front, then it comes too close to this piece over here, which will make it touch, and every time you compress full compression, it's going to touch, and then it's going to be affecting the servo and the steering. So in order to get the servo horn on, we've had to mount the servo from the back, which actually makes it quite nice. It's at a slight angle, and that angle corrects as we go, so it's not so bad. It is at an angle, but we're still getting the proper turn. If we look and we pull that way, or if we look and we pull that way, all that happens is when you're at full swing, you get a slight slant of the tire to the outside. But apart from that, it seems to be good. We just need to see how it is when we put the tires on. Are they going to hit the shocks or any of the links? I don't think it's going to hit the shocks. Maybe might just make contact, so we might have to set the dual rates over there. But the last thing that we need to do is just set this servo to its center position, and then we can lock this up. So that's pretty much finished. That's my setup. As I showed you earlier, we had to set those links in such a way and use the drop links, connector. So basically it connects and then it drops it down slightly so it doesn't hit the chassis. And we use a small spacer in there and also on the other side so we can get that free movement up and down. So the front is sorted. I've wired the servo going around like this. And to be honest with you, maybe there's a reason for it, but personally I don't know why they don't just use straight links on the top. Why did they send a pack with all high clearance links even on the top parts? Perhaps there's a reason for it, but even at the back I've had to do this so that I could put the shocks and it could sit level, and it will also give it a bit more ability to flex. So that's done. LCG chassis. All I need to do is plug in the receiver and set the center point of that servo, put on the servo arm and put wheels, and then this is done. This video's gonna be wrapped up after that. Okay, so we're just gonna quickly calibrate this motor. There we go. So we set the neutral position, full throttle, as you can see, full reverse, as you can see. Okay, let's see if it's working. These metal gears are really noisy. Nothing's rubbing, nothing's binding. It's just the metal gears. The spur gear is metal, the pinion is also metal. Look how slow they can go. Sorry, the desk is still a bit messy, but now we just need to center that servo. And then position that servo horn on it. So I'll do that and I'll be right back. Okay, and that is done. That's perfectly centered without having to do any trimming. So now I'll just connect the link and then put tires on this, and we'll wrap up this video for part 1, and we'll come back once we have the body that we want to put on this rig. So that might be in some weeks or months, depends on when we get stock in this country. Okay, so this is the end of part 1, and we've put everything together. This is the Injora LCG chassis. We've put everything together in a way that it's really, the weight is as low as possible on the chassis, and all we need to do is just play with the shocks and fine-tune them. I put these new rims that we got on, and these tires are replicas of the Maxxis Trepadors. So we're just going to do a basic test, and I'm doing this with one hand, and this test will wrap up this video. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. There we go. We see that LCG coming into effect over there. Took a really steep angle. Look at that flex. that's the extreme point over there. So we need to work on these angles slightly with the shocks and actually get it to be able to tip at a much tougher angle. Okay, we've made it round. Now we'll try that in reverse.